Please comment where you are watching in the world. The first thing I saw when I came back from the bathroom was his hand in my purse. He didn't hear me at first. His head was tilted down, his shoulders hunched, the candlelight flickering over his fingers as they moved with quick, practiced precision. The zipper of my wallet was already halfway open. "What the hell are you doing?" He jolted like I'd just dropped a glass behind him. His hand froze, then retreated, curling into a fist at his side. He turned his head toward me, eyes wide, his mouth opening and closing before he found words. "Babe, I was just going through my bag?" I stepped closer, the sounds of the restaurant fading into a dull background hum. He pulled his hand back, holding it up as if to say, "See? Empty. I thought I saw your phone light up. I was just checking." "My phone's in my pocket." We stared at each other across the small table, the candle between us trembling in its glass holder, the flame bending toward him like it knew something had shifted. The thing is, I'd been uneasy about him for a while. Not enough to walk away, just little moments that didn't sit right. I had met Ryan at a Thursday night trivia my coworkers had roped me into. The pub was crowded, sticky-floored, and smelled faintly of fried food and beer. He was sitting at the bar alone, nursing a pint and watching the muted sports highlights on the TV. I remember noticing him because he was smiling to himself, like he had a secret no one else in the room knew. When I went up to order drinks for our table, he glanced over and said, "You don't look like you're here for football." "I'm not," I said. "Trivia team." He grinned. "Let me guess, you're the one who knows all the random TV questions?" "Guilty." We talked while I waited for the bartender to pour. He had that kind of easy charm that makes you feel like you've known someone longer than 5 minutes. By the time I headed back to my team, he'd bought me a drink for luck. When our team placed second that night, he winked from across the room and mouthed, "Told you." We swapped numbers before I left. Our first date was coffee at a little cafe with wobbly tables and mismatched mugs. He was funny, quick-witted, and just self-deprecating enough to avoid arrogance. He told me he worked in sales, boring to explain, decent enough to pay the bills, and liked to keep his free time spontaneous. Over the next month, we saw each other often. He'd text me mid-afternoon with things like, "Live music at the greenhouse tonight," or "Heard about this new ramen place, you free?" He was never short of suggestions, and I liked his energy. He seemed to want to make the most of every night. But there were little things. Once, when we were walking back from a movie, he spotted a betting shop and said, "Hang on 2 seconds, need to check something." I waited outside, scrolling through my phone. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When he came out, his jaw was tight, and he muttered something about bad odds before changing the subject. Another time, he suggested a fun night out at the casino. I laughed it off, saying I wasn't really into that scene. He looked genuinely disappointed, then shrugged and said, "Another time." He liked to tell stories about his lucky streaks. One was about winning big on a horse race only to blow it all later that night, because I got cocky. He always told them like they were funny anecdotes, but there was a glint in his eyes when he talked about the wins, a hunger that felt different from just remembering a good night. That evening at the restaurant, the first half of the night was perfectly normal. He'd picked the place, a cozy Italian spot with red-checked tablecloths, the kind of place where the waiters know the regulars by name. We ordered a bottle of wine, split bruschetta, joked about the couple in the corner who looked like they were on a painfully awkward first date. Halfway through the main course, I excused myself to the bathroom. It wasn't far, just down a short hallway, so I was only gone a few minutes. When I came back, my purse was on the chair beside him, and he was bent over it, hand inside. A slow, cold anger started burning in my chest. "Move away from my bag," I said. He did, reluctantly, pushing it toward me like it was a peace offering. "You're overreacting. I thought you'd want me to grab it if your phone rang." "My phone hasn't rung," I said. "And my wallet's open." His eyes flickered, and then his tone shifted, just slightly defensive. "Fine. I was going to borrow 20. I was going to tell you." "Borrow? I'll pay you back." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were conspiring. "I'm just a little short right now." "What for?" He looked away, fiddling with his fork. "It's nothing. I can flip it quick if I get the cash." The phrasing made my stomach knot. "Flip it? Ryan, are you gambling?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." His voice sharpened. "Okay, maybe I've had a run of bad luck lately. But I've got a system. I just need to get back on track." I stared at him, all the little moments I'd brushed off suddenly clanging together like warning bells. "You were going to steal from me." "It's not stealing if I was going to pay you back, he said, his voice tight. Yes, it is. We sat in tense silence for a few beats. The restaurant noises seemed distant, muffled, like we were in our own little bubble of hostility. I think you should go, I said finally. He blinked. Seriously? Over $20. Over you going through my bag without asking. Over you lying. Over you thinking I wouldn't notice. For a moment, I thought he might try to charm his way out of it. Instead, he muttered something I didn't catch, stood up, and tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table. Not enough to cover his meal, before walking out. I paid the bill, my hands still trembling, and left. Outside, the night air was cool, damp from an earlier rain. I half expected him to be waiting, but the street was empty except for a taxi idling at the corner. At home, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way his hand had moved in my bag, quick and confident. The lack of real shame when I caught him. The next day, I mentioned it to a friend who'd met him once. She hesitated, then said, I'm not shocked. He's got a bad habit. Lost a lot of money last year. I heard he burned through a girlfriend's savings before she kicked him out. It hit me how close I'd come to being part of that pattern. How easily the charm and spontaneity could have kept me from seeing what was right in front of me. Now, when I leave a table, whether it's a date or a friend, my bag comes with me. And I don't ignore the small red flags anymore. Because sometimes they're not small at all. He was taller than I expected. That's the first thing that hit me as I stood half-hidden behind the group of people waiting for taxis outside the bar. The noise of the street was just a wash of bass and passing cars, but my focus was locked on him. Broad shoulders, dark jacket, that head tilt people do when they're in the middle of a fight. And next to him, waving her arms, was her. Her hair was pulled up into a messy bun, the way it used to be when we'd stay in, and she didn't care about looking date-ready. Her cheeks were flushed from either the cold or the shouting. She didn't see me. Neither of them did. But I saw him, and I knew that face. I'd seen it in a photo she'd shown me once, in her living room, voice trembling as she explained that he'd died in a car crash while trying to surprise her. That was him. The one she called my person. The one she said she still heard in her dreams. The man who was supposed to be dead. Now he was very much alive, and clearly furious. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. I just stood there watching as he jabbed a finger in her direction, and she stepped forward like she might push him. They looked like they knew each other in that way only two people who've shared a bed and a life can. And I just kept thinking, what the hell am I looking at? I'd met her, let's call her Sarah, 2 months earlier. We matched on an app, but unlike most matches, she didn't waste time. No dead-end small talk. Within a few messages, she'd suggested meeting for coffee. She turned up in a deep green coat that made her eyes look brighter, her smile small but warm. We sat outside a little cafe by the canal, and from the start she had this openness that made talking to her easy. She had a way of leaning in when you spoke, like she was pulling your words closer. I noticed the way her fingers kept brushing the rim of her cup, like she needed to be doing something with her hands. We talked about the usual work, hobbies, places we'd traveled. Then, in the middle of a quiet moment, she dropped it. My ex died last year. Just like that. No warning. She didn't cry right away, but her voice went softer as she told me they'd been together for years. They were serious. He'd died in a car crash on the way to surprise her. She said she still had his hoodie folded on a shelf, untouched. I remember freezing, spoon halfway to my mouth, because what do you even say to that? I told her I was sorry. I told her she didn't have to talk about it if she didn't want to. She said she'd never told anyone new before, that it was too painful, that she trusted me enough to say it. And that was it. That was the hook. Not in a cynical way, just, how do you not feel something for someone who's survived that kind of loss? I thought I understood the shadows I sometimes saw in her eyes. We started seeing each other regularly. Not official, but steady. She had this quirky, affectionate way of being around me, sending voice notes in the middle of the day, reminding me to drink water, sending me long messages about a dream she'd had. There was always this undercurrent of intensity, like she was holding on to me a little tighter than necessary. She'd mention him sometimes, never his name, just him, or my person. She'd tell me about the playlists he made her, the trips they planned, how some mornings she still woke up expecting to hear his voice. I told her I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that we could go at whatever speed she needed. She'd just smile, sometimes with tears in her eyes, and lean into me. So that night outside the bar, seeing her with him, seeing him alive, wasn't just shock. It was like my brain couldn't decide whether to be furious, betrayed, or just bewildered. I didn't wait for my Uber. I didn't even go back inside to tell my friends. I just walked. Fast. My phone buzzed a couple of hours later. Miss you. How's your night? Like nothing had happened. I didn't reply. The next day she called. I let it ring. Then she texted saying she was worried I was pulling away, and that losing people made her spiral. That guilt tugged at me even then. I told her we needed to talk. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop near her place. She showed up in an oversized hoodie, messy hair, no makeup. She looked fragile, almost like she'd been crying already. I almost felt bad for what I was about to say. Almost. I asked her straight out who the guy was. She blinked, played dumb, asked what I meant. I told her what I saw, told her I recognized him from the photo she'd shown me. The pause that followed was long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Then she admitted it. He wasn't dead. They'd been together for years, yes, but they'd broken up after a huge fight. She hadn't taken it well. The story about the car crash? She made it up. Said pretending he was gone was easier than telling people he'd left her. Said it stopped the questions, made her look less like the one who was abandoned. And then she met me. And by then, she said, it was too late to backtrack. She stirred her coffee like it was nothing. No tears now. No tremble in her voice. Just a flat delivery of the truth. I sat there staring, trying to connect the woman in front of me with the one who'd told me about the folded hoodie. I left without finishing my drink. She texted afterward, long messages explaining again, saying she really did care about me, saying it wasn't manipulation, it was survival. I didn't respond. I blocked her a week later. I didn't notice it at first. That's the part that still bothers me when I replay it in my head. Not the ugly ending, not the fear, but the fact that it took me so long to see the shape of what was happening. It wasn't like in movies, where someone storms and shouting or slamming doors. It was quieter, softer, like a hand on your back that feels like it's guiding you forward, until you realize it's been steering you somewhere you never meant to go. Marcus wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to be dangerous. He didn't have that restless energy or the sharp tongue some guys use like a weapon. He was deliberate, calm, the kind of calm that makes you feel safe enough to lean closer, to relax your shoulders without even realizing you've done it. We met at a friend's birthday drinks. I was laughing at some half-funny story when I noticed he'd been watching me from across the table. Not staring, watching. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Just smiled like he already knew something about me. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hope you got home safe. Was good talking. It was Marcus. From there, it was easy. Too easy. He remembered little things, my coffee order, the way I always put my left shoe on first, a throwaway comment about hating when people cut across me mid-story. He'd tease me gently about them later, like he kept a private list of my quirks. It felt flattering. Intimate. The first few weeks were a rush. Good morning texts, late-night calls where we'd talk until my voice went hoarse, surprise snacks waiting in his kitchen because I'd mentioned craving them once. He made me feel like I was the most important person in the room, maybe even the world. And yeah, there was a spark, those lingering touches when he brushed past me in the kitchen, the way his eyes would lock on mine and not let go. It was addictive. The first red flag didn't even look like one at the time. I was out with my friend Lena, just pizza and gossip, when he texted saying he missed me. Sweet, right? Then another message popped up. They don't really get us, you know. I kind of laughed it off, told him I'd see him later. But it happened again. And again. If I was with friends, there'd be a text. Sometimes a question about what we were talking about. Sometimes a comment about how certain people didn't seem good for me. Always framed like concern, never accusation. And I believed him. I thought maybe he could see something I couldn't. Slowly, without realizing, I started reshuffling my time. Canceling plans because he'd had a bad day. Saying no to invites because I was too tired, when really, I just didn't want to deal with the sulk that would come if I went without him. He never told me directly not to go. He didn't have to. The first real crack came on Lena's birthday. I'd told him a week in advance I'd be going to dinner with her and some others. He said he was fine with it, but halfway through the night, my phone started buzzing. First a message, "Why are you still there?" Then another, "What are you even talking about with him?" And then, "I feel like you don't want to be with me tonight." I left early, just to stop the messages. He was waiting outside my place when I got home, leaning against his car like he'd been rehearsing what to say. He apologized, said he just missed me too much, couldn't stand the thought of me having fun without him. He cried a little. told me I was his whole world. I forgave him. Of course I did. After that, the concern sharpened. It wasn't, I don't think she's good for you anymore. It was, I don't want you seeing her. One by one, people in my life became problems. Lena, because she was toxic. My coworker Ben, because he clearly liked me. Even my own brother, because he didn't respect our relationship. That one made me laugh at first, until I realized he wasn't joking. The thing is, it didn't happen in a single blow. It was a slow drip. By the time I realized how far it had gone, I hadn't seen my friends in weeks. I'd stopped posting online because he'd ask who I was showing off for. I even caught myself feeling guilty for calling my mom too often, because he said she controlled my life. Then Lena messaged me out of the blue. Just a simple, "Are you okay?" She said she hadn't heard from me in ages. I stared at it for an hour before telling Marcus she'd reached out. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just got cold. Said, "If you want to be with her so badly, maybe I should just leave." And then he walked out. That was the first time I felt fear. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes your skin crawl because you realize the person you thought you knew has layers you've never seen. The next day he sent flowers. Apologized again. Said he was just scared of losing me. Said he'd never loved anyone like this. I almost forgave him. Almost. But then he started showing up unannounced, at my work, outside my gym. Even when I told him I needed space, he'd just be there, leaning against his car, eyes on his phone like he was some romantic hero in a film. The final straw was when I told him I wanted a break. I was calm. I explained I felt like I was losing myself. He laughed, not because it was funny, but this short, cold laugh that made my stomach knot. Then he said, "You don't get to just leave me. You're mine." I told him to get out. He didn't move at first, just stared like he was gauging whether I was bluffing. Then he left. I blocked him that night. Changed my locks a week later. Lena and a couple of friends helped me pack a bag in case I needed to crash at theirs. For weeks, every sound outside my window made me jump. Every car door slam made my chest tighten. He tried calling from different numbers for a while, but I never answered. Eventually it stopped. Or maybe he just found someone new to protect. I haven't dated since. I don't even know how to start again. But sometimes, when I'm walking home and see a car idling on the street, I wonder if it's him, waiting, watching, convinced I'm still his. Some people arrive in your life like they've been running toward you the whole time. That was Kara. It wasn't even a spectacular first meeting. We matched on Hinge, and she sent the first message, a short, cheeky line about my sunglasses in one of my photos. "Those are either from a thrift shop or you stole them from an ex." I sent back, maybe both, and she liked that answer enough to keep the chat rolling. She was one of those people who send voice notes instead of long texts, her voice bright and a little husky, like she'd been laughing before she hit record. You can tell a lot about someone by their voice. Hers made me want to lean in closer, even through a speaker. Our first date was meant to be just a drink. A safe, easy exit if the chemistry wasn't there. I picked a dim little bar with red lighting and music low enough that you could hear the ice shift in your glass. She walked in like she owned the place, big smile, hair dyed a sharp electric blue, a leather jacket slung over one shoulder. She hugged me like we'd already met and slid into the booth without breaking eye contact. There was no awkward warm-up. She talked fast, laughed loud, and had a story for everything. Some were outrageous, like the time she claimed she'd been kicked out of a karaoke bar in Osaka for creative reinterpretation of the lyrics. Others were small but telling. Her obsession with chili oil, her superstition about never turning her pillow to the cold side if she's having a bad dream. She didn't just tell stories, she pulled you into them. Her hand would brush yours on the table when she hit a punchline. Her gaze would drop to your mouth for half a second before darting away. There was a heat there, not overtly sexual, but threaded through everything she did. By the end of the night, I'd forgotten all about the one-drink rule. We walked out together, the cool night air hitting like a reset, and she linked her arm through mine without asking. It didn't feel too fast. It felt inevitable. The days after were a blur. She messaged constantly. Not in a clingy "where are you?" way, but in a stream of consciousness kind of way. Photos of her lunch, a meme she thought I'd like, an unfiltered selfie at 2 a.m. with the caption, "Can't sleep, tell me a secret." It was intoxicating. I'd been in something cold before, the kind of relationship where you're always wondering if the other person cares. Kara made it impossible to doubt. By the second week, she was showing up at my place with snacks I'd never tried, Thai crisps, mochi and flavors I couldn't pronounce. We'd binge horror movies, even though she'd bury her face in my shoulder during the scary parts and then peek through her fingers. She talked in her sleep, full sentences that made no sense. Once she mumbled, "Don't open the green door," and I lay there in the dark, smiling at how wildly vivid her dreams must be. It wasn't all playful. Sometimes her energy had an edge to it. If I didn't reply for a couple of hours, there'd be 8 missed calls waiting. When I teased her about it, she'd say, "It's just because I care too much," or "I have anxiety, I overthink." I wanted to be understanding. Everyone has their thing, right? Then there was the lunch incident. I was at work, mid-emails, when my coworker nudged me and pointed to the glass entrance. There was Kara, waving at me with 2 paper bags in her hands, grinning like she'd just won a prize. We'd never talked about where I worked. She'd somehow found out. "Surprise," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. It was cute at the time. I told myself it was romantic. Looking back, it was the first crack. By week 4, things started to feel heavier. She'd cry if I mentioned plans that didn't involve her. She'd drop hints about her exes, painting them all as villains, and I began to notice a pattern. Each story ended with her being the one left behind, and each ex sounded more like a monster than the last. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself she just needed someone steady. But then came the night that erased all the gray areas. We were in bed, a lazy Sunday morning, sunlight cutting across the sheets. She was quiet, staring at me with this strange, unreadable smile. "I've got a surprise," she said. I laughed. "What kind of surprise?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed her shorts up to her hip, and there it was, my name. My full name, tattooed in bold black letters on the top of her thigh. I laughed at first. I genuinely thought it was a prank. "That's not real," I said, waiting for her to peel off a temporary tattoo or burst out laughing. She didn't. She just held my gaze and said, "Now you can't leave me." The air in the room changed. My mouth went dry. I wanted to ask why, but I already knew I wouldn't get an answer that made sense. The skin was still red around the ink. This wasn't a whim from years ago. This was days old. I didn't sleep that night. I lay still, her arm draped over me, her breathing slow and even, while my mind ran in panicked circles. In the morning, she made pancakes like nothing had happened. I told my friend about it later, showed him a photo I'd taken while she slept. He didn't even joke. "You need to get out," he said. He was right, but I didn't. Not straight away. I tried to ease out instead, slower replies, less inviting her over. She noticed. The call started again, more insistent this time. One night, she left 27 voicemails in a single stretch. Some were sobbing, some were angry, some were disturbingly calm. In one, she laughed and said, "I regret this," and then there was silence for days. I thought maybe it was over. Then one evening, I got home from work and there she was, sitting on my front steps in the cold. She said she had nowhere to go. I let her in, because I'm an idiot, because she looked small and tired, because part of me still felt responsible. We sat on the couch. I started telling her we needed to end it for good. She didn't interrupt. She just pulled out her phone and started recording me. "For proof," she said, "in case you lie later." My stomach dropped. I told her to leave. She didn't move. I had to threaten to call the police before she finally stood up, muttering something under her breath. I only caught part of it. "You think this is over?" I blocked her on everything. Changed my locks. Told my building's security. For a while, she made new Instagram accounts just to send me photos, sometimes of herself outside places I'd been earlier that day. No captions, just proof she was still around. Then it stopped. Weeks of silence. I started to breathe again. But one night, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. It said, "I still love you. I think you're making a mistake. Come talk to me." And that was it. It's been over a year. I haven't seen her. But I still check behind me when I turn a corner. I still tense up if someone says my name in a crowded place. And I still think about the tattoo, whether it's still there, whether she ever covers it, or if someone else has had to see it and wonder about the story behind it. I still remember the first time I saw his profile. Not the photo exactly, but the feeling it gave me. That little skip in my chest when someone's picture makes you pause instead of swiping without thinking. It was Dylan. And it wasn't even that he was model hot. He wasn't. He had this laid-back smile, a hint of stubble lovely. We matched on Bumble, which I am sure you have heard of. He messaged me to begin with, something playful about my bio where I'd written, "We'll judge you by your coffee order." He sent, flat white, no sugar. How am I doing so far? The reply came with a winking emoji that felt just the right side of confident. I could tell right away he was one of those guys who could hold his own in a conversation without trying too hard. You know, that rare mix of quick wit and light teasing, balanced by actual interest in what you're saying? Our initial date was coffee by the canal. The weather was decent, warm enough to sit outside without shivering, cool enough for him to wear this soft black hoodie that had no logo, no branding, just clean lines. He had on sleek gray trainers that looked too nice to be worn every day, and he carried a reusable water bottle like it was an extension of his hand. When I asked why, he just smiled and said, "Stay hydrated for clarity." I didn't know what the hell that meant, but it made me laugh, and I liked that he didn't explain it further. There was an ease between us straight away. He had one of those calm, low voices that made you lean in without even realizing. The kind of voice you imagine would sound good in your ear, late at night, when the lights are low. And yeah, I noticed the way his eyes lingered just a second longer than necessary when I spoke. That slow, deliberate kind of attention that makes your skin feel warmer. We didn't kiss that first date. Just a hug goodbye that lingered half a beat longer than casual. But I went home buzzing, already replaying his smile in my head. After that, we weren't doing formal dates all the time. More like casual drop-ins. He'd meet me outside work, sometimes with takeaway coffees, sometimes just to walk with me until I got to my bus stop. Once we grabbed noodles and ate them on a bench, knees brushing in that subtle way that feels more intimate than holding hands. There was always this charged undercurrent between us, like if either of us leaned in just a little more, something would happen. But here's where it started to get odd. He never once invited me to his place. At first, I didn't even clock it. I wasn't pushing for overnights. But after a couple of weeks, I realized that every time the topic could have gone there, he'd slide around it like water slipping past your fingers. The first excuse was that his building was under renovation. Then it was that his cousin was staying with him. Another time, he claimed his shower wasn't working, so he'd been going to the gym every day to clean up. All of it sounded possible. Not likely, but possible. And because he always seemed freshly showered, dressed neatly, smelling faintly of something warm and woody, I didn't question it too hard. Still, the gym thing came up a lot. More than it should have. And not in the way fit guys talk about it, either. He never looked like he'd actually been working out. It was just always part of his timeline. After the gym, before the gym, on my way to the gym, like it was a placeholder in his day. By week 3, I started noticing other little things. His phone was almost always on airplane mode when we were together. He never took calls in front of me. Once, he told me he had a work meeting, but I spotted him sitting at a bus stop for nearly an hour, scrolling through Spotify like he was killing time. And when I asked about his job, he said he was in tech, some kind of product manager. He'd get vague. It's a sprint week, or, you know how tech is. I work in an office. I do know how tech is. And that wasn't it. One afternoon, I texted him saying I was near his area and had a long break. I asked casually if I could drop by his place. He dodged it completely. Didn't even give an excuse this time, just changed the topic to ask if I wanted bubble tea. That was the first time my gut really spoke up. Later, I told my friend Anika about it, laughing it off. She didn't laugh. She just said, "Girl, either he's married or he's broke." I laughed then, but her words stuck in my head like a burr. A few days after that, curiosity got the better of me. Not the kind of curiosity where you scroll back through texts or check someone's tagged photos. The kind that makes you grab your keys and drive somewhere you probably shouldn't. Dylan had once mentioned his gym was 24/7 and near the old station road. That's not a big area. So one night, I drove over. I saw it before I saw him. A silver hatchback parked just behind the gym, tucked in the shadow of the building. Lights off. And then in the driver's seat, leaning back in that same black hoodie, Dylan. I drove past slowly, pretending I didn't notice, my pulse in my throat. I parked around the corner and waited. 15 minutes passed. Then I saw him open the driver's door, step out, stretch like he was waking up. He tossed a small duffel into the back seat. And then I saw it. He pulled out a toothbrush from the pocket of his hoodie. That's when it hit me. He didn't have a condo. He didn't even have a flat. Dylan was living in his car. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt this sharp pang of sympathy. The other part was reeling, because he'd built this whole sleek, confident image and never once hinted that his life looked nothing like the picture he'd painted. I didn't text him for 2 days. On the 3rd, he messaged me. "Everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Are you living behind the gym?" There was no reply for hours. Then finally, yeah, nothing else. I told him I wasn't mad. I just didn't understand why he'd lied. His reply is burned into my brain, because I like pretending I have something to offer. We didn't see each other following. I drove past the gym a week later out of habit. The car was gone. Maybe he found a place. Maybe he left the city. Sometimes I wonder if someone else figured him out. But more often, I think about how perfectly he'd played the role, how easy it had been to believe him because I wanted to. The first time he suggested the strip club, I laughed. Not because I was into the idea, but because it was a Tuesday. Who even goes to a strip club on a Tuesday? Apparently Ethan did. We'd only been out once before, and that was a pretty standard dinner and drinks date. He was handsome in a slightly unruly way. Dark hair that looked like he'd run a hand through it one too many times. A fitted shirt that hinted he went to the gym without living there. He had a confident energy, the kind that can be charming in small doses. But on our second date, over a couple of cocktails at a downtown bar, he leaned in and said, "You know what would be fun? We should go to Starlight." I frowned. "Starlight?" He grinned. "Strip club. Best in the city. Trust me, their wings are amazing." Now, I'm not a prude, and I've been to strip clubs before, with friends, for birthdays, hen parties. But the idea of going there on a date, this early in knowing someone, felt odd. "You want to go to a strip club? Right now? On a date?" He nodded like it was the most natural suggestion in the world. "Yeah, it'll be fun. You're cool, right?" That last part made my stubborn streak flare. Being cool was not the same as being dragged into someone else's fantasy. I told him I wasn't sure it was the vibe I was after. He laughed, flagged the bartender for the check, and said, "Come on, live a little." I should have said no, but part of me was curious. Why was he so insistent? And a petty little voice in my head said, "Fine, let's see what your idea of a fun date is." So I agreed. The cab ride over was a mix of small talk and him hyping up the place, the music, the energy, the talent. I noticed he kept checking his phone, thumbs flying, then slipping it back into his pocket like he didn't want me to see the screen. When we got there, the neon sign buzzing above the entrance threw pink light over the sidewalk. A bouncer in a black jacket gave us a nod and waved Ethan through like they knew each other. Inside, it was the usual sensory overload, bass-heavy music vibrating through the floor, dim lights punctuated by spots of bright color, the smell of perfume and something fried drifting from the kitchen. Ethan was in his element, steering us toward a table with a perfect view of the main stage. A dancer in silver heels and very little else was mid-routine, the crowd cheering as she spun effortlessly around the pole. I settled into my seat, feeling a little out of place but determined to roll with it. We ordered drinks. Ethan kept glancing around, scanning the room, like he was looking for someone. Then I saw her. She walked out onto the stage in a red set that caught the light with every move. Long legs, confident smile, hair that curled perfectly over her shoulders. The crowd reacted instantly. Whistles, applause, someone at the back yelling her name. I felt Ethan straighten beside me. His grip tightened slightly on his glass. His eyes locked on her with an intensity that made my stomach twist. I turned to him slowly. "You know her?" He smirked, not looking away. "That's my ex." My eyebrows shot up. "Your ex works here, and you brought me here." He finally looked at me, grinning like he'd just revealed the punchline to a great joke. "Yeah, thought it might be interesting for her to see me with someone new." I stared at him. "So I'm what? A prop?" "Not a prop," he said, leaning in. "Just a reminder of what she's missing." The audacity of it was almost impressive. Almost. The next few minutes were a blur of me processing what he'd just admitted. He was laser-focused on the stage, clearly hoping she'd notice him. She did. About halfway through her routine, her gaze swept the room, landed on him, and paused. Her smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker in her eyes. She finished her set to loud applause, then disappeared backstage. Ethan looked smug, leaning back in his chair like he'd just won something. "She saw me," he said, as if that was the whole point of the evening achieved. I sipped my drink, equal parts annoyed and fascinated to see how this would play out. About 10 minutes later, she reappeared, not on stage, but walking straight toward our table. Ethan straightened in his seat, clearly ready for some dramatic confrontation. Instead, she stopped right next to me. "You must be the date," she said, smiling warmly. Up close, she was even more striking, and her tone wasn't hostile, just knowing. I nodded. "Apparently so." She glanced at Ethan, then back at me. I'm sorry he dragged you here. He's done this before. Ethan's smugness evaporated. Hey! She ignored him. He thinks it'll get a reaction out of me. It doesn't. But you seem nice, and I don't like the idea of you feeling weird about this. There was something disarming about how direct she was. I laughed, tension melting a little. Well, thanks. That's unexpectedly sweet. She smiled. Enjoy your night. And if you ever want to come back without him, the wings really are good. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan sitting there, red creeping up his neck. The rest of the night was awkward. He tried to brush it off, make jokes, but the dynamic had shifted completely. I wasn't interested in playing his little jealousy game, and his ex had handled it with such effortless grace that his attempt to get under her skin had completely backfired. We finished our drinks in near silence. When he suggested another round, I shook my head. I think I'm going to head home. He didn't protest much. Maybe he realized the evening hadn't gone the way he'd planned. Outside, the neon buzzed overhead, casting everything in pink again. As I walked away, I couldn't help but smile a little. Not because the date had been good. It hadn't. But because there was something satisfying about seeing someone's petty scheme collapse in real time. And because somewhere inside that club, a woman in red lingerie was probably laughing about it too. The first thing I saw was the body. Not Liam, the man who'd driven me here. Not the exposed brick walls or the half-finished renovations. The body. On the ground. Motionless. It took my brain a beat too long to register what I was looking at. My eyes jumped to the unnatural bend of one arm, the way his head was tilted at an angle no living person could hold, the pale, waxy skin that caught the dim light from the hallway bulb. There was a faint metallic tang in the air, sharp enough to make my stomach turn. I took a step back, my heel crunching on dust and plaster. Liam, what? He turned to me with a strange calm, as if we'd just stumbled across a misplaced chair. Okay, he said evenly. You need to listen to me very carefully. That was the moment I realized two things at once. One, I was standing a few feet from a dead man, and two, the person I'd come here with was not reacting like a normal human being. It's strange how quickly you can rewind your life when you're scared. In the space of a few seconds, my mind shot back to 3 weeks earlier, to the night I first met him. It was at a friend's get-together, the kind where everyone ends up clustered in the kitchen, because that's where the drinks are. He was standing near the fridge, holding a bottle of beer, talking to two people I vaguely knew. Tall, broad shoulders, shirt sleeves rolled up just enough to look casual but deliberate. He caught my eye and smiled, like we'd already shared an inside joke. We ended up talking for most of the night. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most interesting person in the room, asking questions, actually listening to my answers, laughing at my stories. He worked in property development, he said, flipping houses and managing renovations. He didn't seem like the type to brag, but there was an ease in the way he talked about his work, like he'd done well for himself. At the end of the night, he asked for my number. His voice was warm, confident, not pushy. I said yes without hesitation. The first 2 dates were exactly what you'd hoped for: good food, easy conversation, the comfortable feeling of getting to know someone new without any awkward silences. He had a knack for choosing places I liked: a little wine bar tucked down a quiet street, then a rooftop restaurant with a skyline view. By the third date, I was starting to think maybe this could be something. He was attentive, remembered small details I'd mentioned, and never looked at his phone when we were together. So when he suggested dinner somewhere special on a Thursday night, I agreed. He offered to pick me up, saying the restaurant was a bit out of the way. That night, he arrived right on time in a sleek black car that smelled faintly of leather and his cologne, something warm and woodsy. On the drive, he was a little quieter than usual, glancing at his watch a couple of times, but when I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, "Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." The restaurant was upscale but not pretentious, with soft lighting and a low hum of conversation. Over a glass of wine, he asked me questions that felt slightly different from before, not just about my day or my hobbies, but about my values, my ideas of loyalty, whether I'd stand by someone if they were in trouble. I laughed it off at first, but he pressed, in that smooth way he had, until I said something about loyalty being important to me. He smiled like he'd just confirmed a theory. After dinner, instead of heading straight back, he said he wanted to show me a property he was working on nearby. "It's not finished yet, but I'm proud of it. You'll see why." I hesitated for a second. It was late, and I didn't know the area, but he was so matter-of-fact about it that I agreed. We drove to a quiet street lined with houses in varying states of repair. He pulled up in front of a tall, narrow townhouse with scaffolding on one side. The street lamps here were dim, casting long shadows across the pavement. He unlocked the front door and gestured for me to go in first. Inside, the air was cooler, with that faint smell of plaster dust and something else I couldn't place. The hallway light was on, but the rest of the house was dark. He led me into the living room, and that's where I saw him. The dead man. I froze, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. Was this some kind of dark joke? A staged mannequin? No. This was real. Too real. Liam stepped closer, his voice low and deliberate. Okay, this is bad. But if we're smart, we can get through it. You were with me all night, right? My mouth went dry. We need to call the police. He cut me off sharply. No. If they find out you were here, they'll think you were involved. You touched the door handle coming in. Your fingerprints are here now. I stared at him, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. What are you talking about? I just got here. I don't know this man. Exactly, he said. And that's why you need to back me up. We'll say we were together somewhere else. They can't prove otherwise if we stick to it. The calmness in his tone was more terrifying than if he'd been panicked. He wasn't reacting to a sudden crisis. He was sliding me into a role. When I didn't answer, he tilted his head, studying me. Look, you're already part of this whether you like it or not. You've been seen with me. You're here. If I go down, so do you. I felt the walls closing in. My pulse was racing, my hands trembling. I needed to get out. I forced my voice to stay even. I just need some fresh air. He didn't move to stop me, just watched as I backed toward the hallway. The moment I was out of his line of sight, I turned and ran. My shoes crunched on the gravel outside, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't stop running until I saw the glow of a corner shop a block away. I burst inside, startling the man behind the counter, and begged to use their phone. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely dial my friend's number. She picked me up within 15 minutes, and I didn't look back once. I didn't call the police that night. I told myself it was because I didn't know what to say, but the truth was I was terrified. Terrified he'd find me, terrified of being dragged into something I didn't understand. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at my door. 2 detectives stood there, polite but firm. They asked if I knew Liam, and if I'd been to a certain address on a Thursday night. My stomach turned cold. They told me Liam had been arrested for the murder of a man named Daniel Price. An anonymous tip had placed me at the scene. That was when I knew he'd planned it. From the dinner questions about loyalty to steering me into that house, it had all been deliberate. I was supposed to be part of his alibi, or maybe even his scapegoat if things went wrong. I told the detectives everything, every detail. They listened, took notes, and assured me I wasn't a suspect. But even after they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in a holding cell or an interview room, Liam was still thinking 3 moves ahead. I met him in a plant shop that smelled like wet optimism. You know the kind, walls dense with greenery, the air humid enough to fog your glasses, a playlist that sounds like it's trying to seduce a yoga instructor. I was there to buy a fern. Not because I needed a fern, but because I'd killed my last one, and guilt is a powerful motivator. He was standing by the fiddle-leaf figs, wearing a loose cream sweater and looking like the kind of man who could plank for 5 minutes without blinking. His hair had that expensive messiness, not too styled, not too raw, and there was a small silver ring in his left ear. We both reached for the same watering can on a display shelf. Our fingers brushed. I expected him to say sorry or go ahead. Instead, he put one finger to his lips. Not the cute SHHH you give a friend in a library. This was the slow, deliberate, don't frighten the rare bird kind of shush. I laughed automatically. He shushed again, softer this time, eyes narrowing in what might have been reproach or flirtation. Then he smiled. His name was Silas. We ended up talking. Well, he talked in a low voice, and I talked in my normal register until he tilted his head like my decibels were bruising the leaves. At the counter, when I was paying for the replacement fern, he asked if I wanted to get a drink sometime. I said yes because I was curious, and because curiosity, for me, is just foreplay for regret. We met at a speakeasy with velvet booths and menus that used the word unctuous twice. The lighting was low enough that everyone looked a little better than they were. He greeted me with that same finger over his lips. I grinned. You're keeping the bit going? His eyes softened, and he leaned in slightly. Not a bit, he whispered. Words steal your aura. I blinked. My aura? He nodded gravely, and then, I swear on my fern, He shushed the air again, like he was sedating it. The server appeared. I started to say, "Can we get?" But Silas raised a hand, palm hovering just above the table, and breathed out slowly. "Let's settle the field first," he murmured. The server looked at me like, "Are you safe?" I gave a small, nonverbal shrug that meant, possibly not, but let's see where it goes. I ordered a mezcal because smoke felt appropriate. Silas ordered a room-temperature water, stirred clockwise 7 times. The server said, "We can do water." Silas closed his eyes, palms up, blessing the tap in his mind. Silas was kind. Earnestly so. His gaze was steady, attentive. He asked questions about my work as a junior architect, about the last thing I'd drawn just for myself. And when I started to answer, he'd let me speak for about 5 words before putting a finger over his lips and shhhing me. Not rudely. Almost tenderly. "Not to stop you," he mouthed. "To protect you." From what, exactly, was unclear. When I laughed, he leaned forward, whispering, "You're hemorrhaging prana." I took a long drink of mezcal, the smoke curling up my nose, trying to anchor myself in something solid. The food arrived, seared scallops, as promised, unctuous. He held his hand above each plate and made a low hum. "Clearing," he said. I took a forkful just to remind myself the earth was still turning. He shushed my fork. "Metal is loud." Halfway through, the NSFW twist arrived, not in action but in implication. Silas set down his fork, looked at me with absolute sincerity, and said, "I should tell you, I practice quiet intimacy." I tilted my head. "Meaning?" "In the bedroom," he whispered, glancing around as though the velvet booths had ears. "No talking. No performative sounds. Noise scatters the arousal field." He said arousal field with the same reverence clergy use for sacrament. My face did the internal math of horror. "So, you shush your partners?" "Only when necessary," he said. 1x groaned too brightly. I had to shhh mid-act to maintain coherence. I coughed, choking on scallop. He reached out, palm hovering over my wrist, not touching, just doing some invisible energy CPR. A table of birthday girls started singing. Silas went rigid. "Excuse me," he whispered and stood. He crossed the room like a man with a mission. And then he shushed them. Not jokingly, not playfully, with the full gravity of a substitute teacher in the 90s. "Mid-dash to you," they faltered into silence. One of them laughed. Someone booed. Silas bowed slightly, then returned to our booth looking serene. "Saved your aura," he said, sitting down. I downed the rest of my mezcal. He shushed the swallow. By this point, I was oscillating between fascination and wanting to run. But there was something magnetic about how unflinching he was in his convictions. He wasn't doing a bit. This was his world, and I was the interloper. When the bill came, he paid in cash, carefully folding the notes in a neat stack. He didn't tip. "Money carries energy," he said, "and I don't want to pass mine on." I slipped a few bills under the tray when he wasn't looking. Outside, the air was cool. He walked me toward the station. Under the sodium lights, he took both my hands and looked earnestly pleased. "You're very loud," he said, like it was the highest compliment. "But we can soften you. I can teach you containment." "Containment," I repeated, already imagining being spooned and shushed for breathing. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place for a quiet cuddle. I pictured lying in his bed while he hovered his palm over my forehead, shushing my REM cycles. I said I had early meetings. He texted the next day, "Had a great time. Noticing tinnitus after our date, could be your laugh." I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, gloriously unshushed, and blocked his number. That night, my roommate dragged me to a karaoke bar. I sang off-key for 2 hours straight, loud enough to bruise the air. My aura survived. His name was Dean, and I met him on Tinder. He arrived on time for our date we arranged, which is already rare enough that I mentally gave him a gold star. What I wasn't expecting was the canvas tote he set in the spare chair between us. It looked heavy, like it contained something alive. "I brought someone," he said. Then, with the formality of a magician revealing the sawed-in-half assistant, he reached in and produced a taxidermy gray squirrel. "Meet Bernard," he said. Bernard's glass eyes had the kind of eternal knowledge you find in library basements. His tiny paws were posed mid-plea. There was an actual bow tie affixed under his chin. I said, and my sentences quietly climbed out of my body and went to hide behind the dessert menu. "Bernard is my chaperone," Dean explained while the waiter hovered, caught between horror and customer service. "He used to be my father's." He patted Bernard's rigid head with surprising tenderness. Dad said he'd watch over me. He was joking at the time, but then he died suddenly, and well, Bernard's sort of continuing education. Now, I'm not unkind. I catalog relics of grief for a living. Lockets with hair, portraits painted after death, letters stained with salt water. But I had never shared bread with a preserved rodent in formal wear. The waiter approached with the kind of professionalism that deserves a medal. "Sparkling or still?" he asked, but looked at Bernard when he said it. I chose sparkling because I needed violence in my bubbles. Dean ordered still for Bernard, then asked, earnestly, if they had a booster seat. They did not. Bernard, therefore, sat in a fold of the tote, propped so he could see me. The menu trembled in my hands. My brain was screaming this as a man test. Dean was handsome in the way that implied a good relationship with sunscreen and floss. He asked about my work and listened with the kind of focus that felt almost intimate. Whenever I finished an answer, he turned Bernard slightly toward me, as if to say, "See, she's interesting." "You probably think this is weird," Dean said. I chose a word that wouldn't send me to hell. Unforgettable." He smiled, relieved. "It's not like I bring him everywhere. Just first dates. If someone can't handle Bernard, maybe they can't handle me." I wondered which me he meant, the one who brings a dead squirrel to dinner, or the one who needs to. The risotto came, perfectly earthy, steam curling upward. Dean ceremonially held a grain to Bernard's mouth. "For luck," he said. I took a polite bite and tried not to laugh into truffle fumes. It was going fine, surreal but fine, until the NSFW curveball. Dean leaned in and, in a low voice, said, "I should tell you, Bernard also protects my romantic energy." I blinked. "Meaning?" "When I'm on a date, I have a tendency to move too fast. Touch too soon. Bernard's presence reminds me to slow down. Be chivalrous." His eyes flicked to my neckline, then back up, not leering, more like someone checking the time. My skin prickled, part flattered, part wary. "So Bernard is like a Victorian chaperone," I said. "Exactly," he said. "Only stuffed." The waiter returned, clearly dying to gossip in the kitchen. We ordered wine, red for me, nothing for Bernard. Dean told me about his father. Camping trips, bad puns, the way he'd invent elaborate stories for the animals they saw. Mid-meal, a little girl at the next table peered over the banquette, wide-eyed. "Is that a squirrel?" Dean turned, teacher gentle. "Yes. This is Bernard. He's dead," she announced, in the blunt way only children and museum labels can manage. Her mother reached to pull her back, mortified, but Dean smiled softly. "He is," he said, "but he still helps us be brave." The girl nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Her mother mouthed sorry. I was starting to soften, against my better judgment. After dinner, we walked. Dean carried Bernard like an heirloom, ridiculous and sacred. On a corner by a florist, he paused. "Can I be even weirder?" "At this point the curve is broken," I said. He set Bernard on a brick ledge beneath a window of geraniums. "My dad told me, if you ever get serious about someone, introduce Bernard to the night, see if the world approves." We stood there, the cool air curling around my legs, people passing and pretending not to stare. Bernard faced the street like a tiny knight. "Okay," I said, surprising myself. "Let's do it properly." I put on my best ceremonial voice. "Bernard, witness, the knight approves." Dean laughed, relief washing over his face. For a moment, it was sweet. And then, as we stood there, I noticed his hand had drifted, not quite touching me, but hovering close to the small of my back. Close enough that I could feel the ghost of his heat. He caught me noticing and smiled, almost sheepishly. "See," he murmured. "Bernard keeps me good." I wasn't sure if it was good that I was suddenly aware of exactly how broad his shoulders were, or bad that part of me wondered what would happen if Bernard wasn't here. We reached the station. He hesitated, as if waiting for permission. "Would you want to carry him?" he asked, holding out Bernard like an offering. I took the squirrel. The fur was softer than I expected, the weight oddly intimate in my arms. And that's when I noticed something. The bow tie wasn't just a bow tie. Pinned to it was a tiny scrap of paper, folded twice. I glanced at Dean. He was checking the train times, and before I could talk myself out of it, I opened it. In small, cramped handwriting. "Bernard says she's not the one. Too fidgety. Talks too much. Smells complicated." My stomach dropped. Dean turned back, smiling, completely unaware I was holding his little insult note. "So," he said, "second date?" I handed Bernard back, careful not to crush him. "I think Bernard and I need to see other people," I said. His smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face. I didn't explain. Just stepped toward my platform, the paper still burning in my palm. On the train, I crumpled it and tossed it in the bin. Watching it disappear between the sliding doors, I thought, people keep the strangest things to make love stay. Sometimes it's a lock of hair. Sometimes it's a stuffed squirrel. And sometimes it's a list of reasons you'll never be enough, hidden in a bow tie. The first thing you should know is that I have poured drinks for men who order espresso martinis at 10 a.m., and I've made small talk with women who sip Chardonnay like it's holy water. I thought I'd seen every possible way a drink order could tell you about a person. I was wrong. The second thing you should know is that I wasn't going to go on this date at all. I was 2 shifts deep into a 5-day run behind the bar. My feet felt like they'd been replaced with clenched fists, and my social battery was flatter than the soda gun after midnight. But then there were his messages, long, careful paragraphs that felt like they'd been written by someone who didn't just want to talk to me, but wanted to know me. I like the way you describe music, he'd written after I'd gone on a tangent about drummers who treat the snare like it's a heartbeat. I like the way you say tender about cymbals. So I showed up. The bar was one of those dim, narrow places where the lighting is the color of regret, amber and shadowy, like you're already halfway to making a bad decision. He was sitting at a corner table, posture slightly folded, like a man who'd grown too tall too fast and never quite learned where to put all his limbs. His name was Calder, like the sculptor. Kind face. Eyes that seemed to register everything. I slid into the seat opposite him, ran my eyes over the menu and said, "Whiskey sour?" He pressed his lips together, as though he'd just tasted invisible air. "Actually," he said, "could I get a glass of milk?" I thought he was joking. I laughed, not a polite laugh, but the kind that bursts out before you can stop it. He didn't laugh back. "Whole milk, if they have it," he added, completely serious. That was the moment I knew this was going to be a story, though I didn't yet know if it would be funny, sweet, or something I'd never tell anyone. The bartender, a friend of mine, raised an eyebrow when I ordered it. "You're kidding," she said. "I am not," I replied. She poured from some carton that probably hadn't been touched since brunch service, slid it toward me like contraband. When I set it down, Calder's eyes warmed. "Thank you," he said, and raised it the way men in movies raise whiskey before delivering a monologue. He took a long, reverent sip. A faint mustache of foam clung to his upper lip. He didn't wipe it away. "So," I said, clinging to normalcy, "what do you do?" "I teach meditation to teenagers," he said. His voice had the softness of someone who has learned to wrap his words in cotton wool before letting them out. "And I'm experimenting with purity." He didn't mean chastity, though that would have explained a lot. He meant what he called energetic purity. From his pocket, he pulled a folded piece of paper, creased and worn like it had lived there a long time. It was a list. No caffeine, no alcohol, no refined sugar after noon, no screens after sunset, no spiky music, heavy metal, trap, aggressive hi-hats. Lots of water, lots of milk. "Milk is grounding," he said. "It coats the nervous system." He tapped his sternum. "My teacher calls it white gold." "Your teacher is either a genius or a dairy lobbyist," I said. He didn't laugh, but his mouth tilted like I'd just attempted a pun. He asked about my drumming. I told him the truth. Rhythm is how I live inside time without fighting it. "My mother says I came out tapping patterns on the NICU blanket." He nodded like I'd just recited scripture. He asked good questions, the kind no one asks unless they actually care. What does it feel like to be perfectly in the pocket? When do I know a night's going to be bad? I told him about the electricity under my skin before a bad set, the way the audience's mood can land on you like weather before you've played a note. He told me every morning he breathes to 96, the year he felt most safe as a child. He said milk helps him remember that feeling. At the other end of the bar, a group of lads ordered tequila shots. One of them shouted, "Who the hell drinks milk?" Calder lifted his glass in salute. The lads hooted, then went back to losing at darts. The bar staff were delighted. I could feel them storing the story, Milk Boy and the drummer. He asked if I wanted to walk. Outside, the night was cool and smelled faintly of citrus peel and wet cardboard. He cradled the glass like it was a candle, while we wandered under strings of festoon lights that made everything look like a party you were about to cry at. "I know it's odd," he said. "I'm not trying to be performative. It's just easy to drink what other people drink, so they don't have to know you. I've always been that person matching. Milk is a way I don't." I thought about the version of me that changes slang depending on who I'm with, the version that can be a mirror when she wants to. I thought about how rare it is to meet someone who's actively resisting that. We reached the river. He took a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down. He didn't show me. The wind lifted strands of my hair and tried to drag them across the water. Then he offered the glass to me. Reader, I drank his milk. It was exactly as weird as you think. But it also tasted like a summer I'd nearly forgotten. The part of childhood before shame, before you learn to measure yourself against other people's yardsticks. He watched my face like he was hoping I'd taste what he tasted. I handed it back. We sat on a bench. He told me about the year of panic attacks, emergency room visits, EKGs always normal, the way his mother would hover in the doorway at night and try not to look scared. My body became a smoke alarm with a dead battery, he said, always beeping the wrong message. He found a teacher who told him sensation is just weather. He changed everything he could change. Started breathing like a cello sounds. Started drinking milk because it reminded him of being small and safe. I don't think milk is magic, he said. I think I just like having a ritual that isn't harmful, even if people laugh. I apologized for laughing earlier. He waved it off. It is funny, he said. I look like a cartoon farmer. We watched the headlights ribbon across the bridge. I realized I felt clear. Maybe from the honesty. Maybe from the lactose. At the end of the night, he asked to walk me to my bike. At the rack, he hesitated, then said, "Can I give you something not weird?" He tore a page from his notebook and handed it to me. In neat block letters, "You play like mercy sounds." Underneath, smaller, "Thank you for meeting me where I live." We kissed once, milk breath and peppermint, delicate and improbable. We saw each other a handful of times after that. Once he came to a set, and I played softer than I ever have, as if volume might bruise him. He brought a thermos. After, he handed me a glass on stage, and the crowd cheered like I'd won a bet. I took a sip and bowed. It didn't last. I drink coffee like a religion. He asked me to try a week without. I did, and I hated the person I became without the small spike that gets me upright. He needed the world to be linen. I like my life denim. The first thing I saw was the dog in the scarf. Not in person, in his profile picture. A scruffy mutt with one ear up, wearing a knitted scarf the color of mustard. The caption read, "This is Havelock. He's better at eye contact than I am." The second thing he sent was a question. "Do you think time is a circle?" I typed back, "Only when I'm dating." He laughed in emoji form, which is not the same, but close enough to get me curious. His name was Ezra, and he taught philosophy. That should have been a red flag. I know enough florists who've dated men who turn every argument into a Socratic seminar, but he had kind eyes in every photo, so I let it slide. We agreed to meet at a bistro that does scallops like apologies, rich, tender, and just a little too expensive for a weeknight. I saw him through the window first. Tall, that kind of tall that makes people in queues glance upward. Handsome, in a way that felt almost accidental. Curls that looked like they'd been sculpted by a breeze. He stood when I came in, said my name like he'd practiced it in the mirror. Zadie. I relaxed exactly 2 degrees. We were 10 minutes into witty banter. He told me about a student who'd turned in an essay entirely composed of memes. I told him about the couple who'd fought over whether ivy was too funeral for their wedding arch, when he excused himself to the restroom. I sipped my drink, texted my best friend that he seemed normal, and mentally congratulated myself for not being on a date with a crypto evangelist for once. And then he came back wearing a wedding dress. Not a subtle one either. Full skirt. Lace bodice. A veil trailing behind him like a sigh. The room reacted in ripples. First, the quiet double take from the couple at the next table. Then the stifled cough laugh from the guy at the bar. The waiter, halfway to our table, froze mid-step, eyes flicking between us like he'd wandered into the wrong dream. I made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a tea kettle deciding to whistle. Ezra held his hands up, palms out. "I wanted to see," he said, "what it feels like to bring the story I'm not supposed to bring." There's a moment, when something so absurd happens, where your brain flips through its internal Rolodex of possible explanations. Danger, prank, performance, art, mental break. I looked at his face. Not mocking. Earnest. A little terrified. The dress had been altered to fit. The sleeves hugged his arms like they'd been tailored. The bodice sat just right on his frame. "Okay," I said slowly, because I am a woman who deals with brides weekly, and also the occasional emotional collapse near the peonies. "Tell me the story." 3 months ago, his fiancée had left. Not for another person, he said, but for a feeling she'd lost somewhere along the way. I bought this dress with her, he explained. Not for her, obviously, but with her at the shop while she chose hers. It was a joke. The shop assistant said if I tried something on, she'd give us a discount. So I did. She laughed so hard she cried. It was the happiest I'd ever seen her. His voice didn't crack, but something in it leaned toward an edge. And then she fell out of love with me the way a tide falls, slow, inevitable, no one's fault. He took a breath. I've been trying to date without telling that story. To not make it my name tag. But it is my name tag. And I don't know how to be honest without being this. He gestured to the ocean of satin. The bistro had gone into that hush that happens when a room decides to pretend something is normal. The waiter appeared, saintly calm, and said, "Would madam like more water?" I laughed, the room exhaled, and Ezra did too. We ate bouillabaisse like nothing was amiss. I told him about the couples who come into my shop and fight over hydrangeas. He told me how he packs grief into labeled boxes. Her toothbrush, the text thread, the sound of her key in the lock. At some point, the dress receded from the center of the scene. He was funny, in a dry way, asking questions that made me think instead of perform. He told me he tells his students that philosophy is just asking better questions about why your chest hurts. When I asked why he kept the dress, he said, because returning it felt like erasing a chapter that had actual sentences. Also, he added, I look incredible. You do, I admitted. You look like you're about to seduce a duke. After dinner, we walked. Ezra in his dress, me in my civvies. People stared, then decided not to. A group of teenagers yelled, Ya's queen, and he curtsied so gracefully that even the pigeons seemed impressed. I asked if the dress was heavy. It feels honest, he said. Which is heavy. We reached the square where couples sit on benches and pretend not to eavesdrop. A street musician began to play at last, because the universe sometimes enjoys being on the nose. May I? He asked, holding out his hand. We danced a little, my fingers finding satin at his waist. The veil brushed my cheek. He smelled faintly of cedar and whatever starch they'd used on the lace. We laughed. He cried a little. Then so did I. We sat. He admitted he was afraid of calcifying into the man who always tells this story. I told him grief is a dress you grow out of without realizing, until one day you try to zip it and it won't. One day you'll put it on, I said, and it'll be comically tight. You'll look in the mirror and think, this was ever mine. He smiled at that, but there was a flicker of something else, doubt, maybe, or the part of him that didn't want to grow out of it yet. At my door he paused. Second date, he said. No dress. Maybe just the veil. Come as the Duke, I said. We went out twice more. No dress, though the veil lived in his backpack like a parachute. On the third date, in my shop, standing in the walk-in flower cooler because the AC had broken, I said, kiss me before the hydrangeas wilt. He did. Our noses went cold. It didn't end with a wedding. It ended the way decent things sometimes do. Kindness, a small ache, gratitude that felt like a full vase. Months later, he texted a photo, the dress hanging in a charity shop window, sunlight making it glow like a ghost with perfect posture. New witness needed, he wrote. I swiped right because his profile said his favorite smell was butter browning. That's basically my religion. His name was Cashin. We met at a trattoria that smelled like garlic butter and ambition. The owner, Marco, kissed my cheeks and immediately tried to upsell me a wine I couldn't afford. Cashin stood when I arrived. He was taller than I'd expected, with dark hair pushed back like he'd just walked in from a wind that wanted to keep him. His blazer was vintage, you could tell by the stitching, and in the pocket was a small, battered book that looked like it had cursed at least one sailor in its time. We ordered quickly, lasagna for him, pappardelle for me, and I was halfway into a story about a croissant collapse in my pastry kitchen when he raised a hand, eyes gleaming like he'd just remembered a secret. Before we break bread, he said, may I offer something? I assumed he meant a toast. Reader, he stood, placed one hand lightly on my shoulder, the other palm up to the ceiling fan, and began to chant. Latin. At first it was almost funny. The cadence reminded me of those Gregorian chant remixes that go viral on TikTok for a week. A deep, rolling rhythm that made the air around us feel heavier. People looked over. Marco froze mid-pour at the espresso machine. Benedict Domini nos Cashin intoned. And then he kept going. Minute 2. Minute 5. My pappardelle sat in front of me, steam slowly dying. He wove my name into the chant, which somehow made it worse. like discovering someone had left a love note in the margins of a Bible. The words were beautiful and strange, looping around appetite and restraint and holy hunger. I wasn't sure if he was blessing the food or summoning a very patient demon. By minute 12, my appetite had ghosted me. The meatball on a nearby table had gone stiff like Pompeii. Cashin finally sat, looking blissed out. "I wanted to sanctify our meeting," he said. I speared a noodle in self-defense. "You did," I said, trying to sound gracious and not like I wanted to shovel carbs into my mouth before the next incantation. To his credit, he didn't preach. He asked about pastry school, listened like I was telling him the coordinates to buried treasure. I told him about burns that looked like constellations, about waking at 4 a.m. to coax dough into lamination before the city was even awake. He told me he'd been celibate for a year to redirect Eros into study, then glanced at my hands as I mimed kneading dough and murmured, "I am reconsidering." My face went hot. The chemistry, the possibility, was not hypothetical. When I joked about a different kind of benediction later, he put a palm up again. "Only after Vespers," he said, half kidding, half monk. We ate. He told me about a professor who believed every meal should be preceded by silence or song. He asked if I'd ever eaten in total quiet. I told him about the time my oven broke mid-shift, and the entire kitchen went silent as we watched the repair guy dismantle it. By dessert, tiramisu, because I'm not a fool, he reached across the table and took my hand, thumb tracing the edge of my palm. "It's rare," he said softly, "to meet someone who feels lit from within." It was the kind of line that would sound ridiculous from most men. From him, it felt like he'd just put my name in another prayer. We walked by the river. The air was cool, the lights making ribbons on the water. He quoted Catullus, in Latin, then apologized for quoting Catullus because he gets explicit. On a bench, his knee brushed mine. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and he kissed me with devotional care, like my mouth was scripture he was reading for the first time. It might have worked if the world weren't full of meals. On our third date, we were fumbling toward my apartment, both of us already half out of our jackets, when he murmured, "One quick antiphon?" I froze. "Nope." He nodded, like he'd expected that answer, and didn't push. We kissed anyway, slow, unhurried, but I knew. We parted kindly. Weeks later, he texted a photo of a perfect sfogliatella he'd hunted down across the city. "For your benedictions," he wrote. I sent him a voice note pronouncing benedicity correctly, once and for all. Her dating profile was a chaos collage. Courtroom memes, thrifted silk blouses, a photo of her cuddling a chicken like it was a therapy animal. Her bio read, equal parts chaos and consent. Her name was Etta. We matched on a Wednesday night when I was on my third whiskey, decompressing from a case that had eaten my entire week. She messaged first, "Wanna play?" I assumed she meant silly hypotheticals. I did not expect her to follow it up with, "Light roleplay on our date?" I said yes because I'm a public defender, which means I live in a constant state of why not. We met at La Catrina, a loud, warm Mexican place with murals of skeletons drinking margaritas. I spotted her instantly, copper hair piled up like she'd twisted it there mid-walk, a silk blouse the color of a ripe cherry, big gold hoops. She grinned like she'd been waiting to be caught. The host led me to the table. Before I could even sit, Etta slid a manila folder across to me. "Counselor," she said, voice dropping into a register that was equal parts husky and mocking. "My charges." Inside the folder was a 2-page indictment for crimes of passion, typed in courier like she'd borrowed my office computer. Stole my heart, petty larceny. Double-texted, aggravated thirst. Kissed someone in an elevator, public indecency. Looked too good in leather, premeditated hotness. There was even a mugshot, a Polaroid of her, pouting at the camera like a 70s rock groupie. I leaned in. "How do you plead?" She bit her lip, eyes glinting. "Guilty, Your Honor. But I'll need a good defense." The waiter appeared. Without breaking eye contact with me, she said, "We'll need queso. This man is about to work very hard." The waiter blinked, wrote it down, walked away like he'd seen worse. For the next 40 minutes, she stayed in character as Ms. Valentine, a defendant with a tragic backstory involving Prosecco, a rooftop party, and an ex named Blade. She objected to the menu, leading question, Your Honor, addressed the waiter as bailiff, and demanded that I enter into evidence my drink order. I told her it was a mezcal old-fashioned. She smirked like I'd just confessed to a misdemeanor. The queso arrived molten gold. She dipped a chip, pointed it at me like a gavel. "Counselor, I propose a plea deal. What kind of deal? Her smile went slow. Community service performed at my apartment. I raised an eyebrow. Duties to include, she continued. Couch-adjacent neck kisses, light restraints, ethical of course, and reading aloud from spicy fanfic. The way she said ethical made me forget how forks worked. I'm a public defender. Consent is foreplay to me. So I asked about safe words. She said gavel, without hesitation. We fist bumped. When I tried to steer the conversation toward her actual life, siblings, what she did for work outside of this, she put a finger to my lips. Objection, she whispered. Relevance. She winked so hard I worried she'd sprain something. The queso congealed between us while she whispered, sustained, after every pun I made. The bailiff avoided our table now. Part of me was wildly into it. Her commitment, the way her eyes tracked me like we were improvising a play only we knew the rules to. The other part of me, the one that spends all day trying to get real answers out of people, wanted to know the actual woman behind the costume. When the plates were cleared, she leaned in, elbows on the table, gold hoops swinging. Counselor chambers? There was a beat where I considered saying yes. I imagined her apartment, dim light, the way she'd keep the bit going right up until some moment broke it, and we'd both laugh. Instead, I said, Ms. Valentine, I move to dismiss for now. Without prejudice. Something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt, exactly, but a shift. She sat back, smiled, and said, Okay, maybe I'm nervous. That was the first out-of-character thing she'd said all night. I told her I liked her, and that we could do a remand to next week, no costumes. She nodded, serious. Gavel, she murmured, testing the word. Our second date, she came in jeans and a t-shirt that said don't make me use my lawyer voice. No folder. No charges. She was different, still quick, still funny, but more grounded. She told me about her job managing a vintage shop, her cat named Jury, the fact that she'd once broken her ankle falling off a bar while trying to grab a disco ball. We kissed on my stoop, no objections filed. It didn't last past date 3. She liked adrenaline, nights that swung big. I liked Sunday pancakes and the quiet high of winning emotion I thought I'd lose. When we ended it, she mailed me a tiny plastic gavel with a note, for your desk. Use with care. It sits there now, next to the files that eat my soul. Sometimes, when a client says something so absurd it could be fiction, I tap it once quietly. Most people treat dating apps like a clearance rack, flipping quickly, barely looking, tossing things aside at the first wrinkle. Evan's profile made me stop scrolling. Not because it was flashy, quite the opposite. There were only 3 photos. 1, a slightly shy smile in soft light. 2, him holding a mug on a balcony, steam curling up into cool morning air. 3, kneeling in front of what looked like a bird feeder, head tilted, as if mid-conversation with a sparrow. His bio was short. I like listening to birds. Humans too, if they're interesting. I swiped right. His first message wasn't hey or WID. It was, what's your favorite sound? I sent, the low rumble of a train from inside my apartment. And the sound of someone's laugh when they don't want to laugh but can't help it. He replied, wind through high trees. And the sound of my own heartbeat in my ear after running. At the time I thought, poetic. Later I realized, foreshadowing. We met at a cafe where every plant looked more styled than I did. Tall fiddle-leaf figs by the windows, a moss wall behind the counter, tiny succulents on every table. The air smelled of dark roast and something zesty, lemon oil maybe. He was already there, seated by the window in a navy sweater with slightly worn elbows. He stood when I walked over, revealing that he was taller than I'd guessed from his photos. Hi, he said, voice low and almost careful. We shook hands. His was warm, dry, and held mine for exactly 1 beat longer than necessary. Enough to register, not enough to be awkward. The first 10 minutes were the usual dance, jobs. I'm a junior photo editor at a lifestyle magazine. He's a freelance illustrator. Siblings, he has 1 younger sister. I have no siblings but a cousin who might as well be. Oat versus dairy, oating coffee, dairy, and cheese. Then, out of nowhere, he said, Want to see something I'm working on? I braced for an iPad sketch or a design portfolio. Instead, he unlocked his phone, swiped, and turned the screen toward me. A close-up photograph of an ear. It was his ear. The lighting was soft, coming from the left, catching the ridges of the helix and conchus. The detail was startling. You could see faint peach fuzz, the almost invisible whorls of skin. He swiped again. Another close-up. This time the light was cooler, more shadowed, with a faint flush on the upper cartilage. He kept swiping, dozens then hundreds of ear portraits. Morning light, golden hour, black and white, some with water droplets, one with a faint imprint from sleeping on a pillow. I'm documenting micro changes, he explained, eyes on me to gauge my reaction. You can tell when I'm aroused, see how the helix flushes? And when I'm stressed, the lobe tightens. I leaned closer to the screen despite myself. The photos were surprisingly beautiful. Tactile, intimate, but still all ears. All his. After a breakup, I decided to turn inward, he said. Literally. Everyone photographs their face. Ears are honest. They don't know how to pose. He showed me a set titled After Running, another called Listening to SZA, and one labeled NSFW, which was just his ear, slightly redder. I don't post those, he said, cheeks coloring in stereo with the photo. I asked if he photographed other people's ears. He looked startled, even defensive. No. Too invasive. The irony sat between us, sipping a cappuccino. The NSFW undercurrent arrived when he said, "We should do a joint project. Your ear, my ear. Side by side. A diptych called confluence." I raised an eyebrow. And how would we generate the aftershots? His voice dropped, conspiratorial. We could kiss, then document the auricular aftermath. I laughed, partly because it was absurd, partly because his gaze had gone intent in a way that made my skin warm. We finished our drinks and walked out into the cool afternoon. The streets smelled faintly of rain. He noticed everything, a sparrow's nest tucked into a shop sign, the way I kept tucking my hair behind my ear when I talked. We wandered toward the park. The gravel paths crunched underfoot. At a corner under a busted street lamp, he stopped. Looked at me, not at my mouth, but at the side of my face. "Can I?" he asked. I nodded. The kiss was soft, unhurried. When he pulled back, he studied me like I was a rare specimen. "Your tragus just did a thing," he murmured. I laughed, and he smiled like I'd just given him a gift. Over the next 3 weeks, we saw each other often. The ear project became a running joke. Sometimes he'd send me a photo and I'd text back mock critiques. Strong composition, but the lobe feels unmotivated. He was deliberate in everything. The way he touched my arm when making a point, the way he brushed my hair back before kissing me. But the documenting never stopped. When I was sad, he wanted to photograph the tear streaks. When I was flushed from laughing, he wanted to capture the heat aura. Sometimes I wanted him to just be there in the moment, not frame it for later. One night, we planned to cook together. I was chopping garlic when I felt him step behind me, his chest warm against my back, hand resting lightly on my hip. My body leaned into him instinctively. Then, the click of his phone's camera. I turned, knife still in hand. "There was steam curling past your lobe," he said, eyes bright. It was perfect. I set the knife down. "Evan, maybe not right now." His brow furrowed. "But this is the whole point. Capturing the truth of a moment. Sometimes the truth is just living it," I said. He looked at me like I'd told him the sun didn't rise in the east. We broke up a week later. It was mutual, gentle. He said he needed someone who understood the project as an extension of intimacy. I said I needed someone who could close the gallery app and just look at me. Before we parted, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a print of my ear in late afternoon light, hair tucked back, skin glowing. "It's one of my favorites," he said. "I keep it in a drawer. Sometimes I take it out and think, parts of us bloom under attention, parts of us need the dark. And yes, my tragus really is a star." Her first message said, "I bring references." I thought she meant friends who could vouch for her, or maybe glowing Yelp reviews if she was joking. I didn't think she meant it literally. Her name was River. Yes, like the noun, and she had eyebrows that could win arguments on their own. Her profile pictures had that curated chaos. Photos of her on mountaintops, in thrift stores, holding a loaf of bread like a newborn. We matched on a Thursday afternoon. She suggested a pub with fairy lights strung everywhere and a carpet that looked like it had survived several wars. I got there first, ordered a pint, and was busy pretending to read the specials board when she walked in. She was shorter than I expected, wearing a green dress and boots that had definitely seen real mud. She smiled when she spotted me, warm, easy, and then stepped aside to gesture at the man following her in. "This is Gareth," she said, like she was introducing an appetizer. "My landlord." I blinked. Gareth was in his 50s, graying at the temples, and carrying a clipboard like it had been surgically attached. "Evening," he said, shaking my hand with the grim professionalism of someone who has replaced a lot of boilers. They sat opposite me, River in the middle, Gareth on the edge. He flipped the clipboard toward me. The first page read, Prospective Partner Assessment. Columns labeled income stability, noise tolerance, shower duration, mold awareness, communication during conflict. My soul briefly left my body and hovered by the dartboard. River looked apologetic but unyielding. I've had awful relationships, she said. Thought I'd outsource the first pass screening to someone who knows leases. Gareth nodded like a judge. We'll just be doing a quick suitability check. The questions started simple. Occupation? UX research, I said. Employment length? 3 years at the same company. He made a small mark. Then, conflict style? Direct but not aggressive, I said. River's eyes flicked to me, like she was mentally underlining that. Then we hit the intimacy logistics section. Frequency expectations? Gareth asked, pen poised. I blinked. That's between me and River, isn't it? He looked at me over the clipboard. It's relevant to compatibility. River sipped her beer like this was the most normal thing in the world. 2 to 3 times a week? I offered, feeling like I'd just given a deposition. Preferred hours? Gareth asked. River murmured, I'm a morning person, and he wrote AM. Noise level? I stared at the table. I adapt. He wrote something down and moved on to soundproofing experience and tolerance for accidental lockouts. The whole time, River was watching me with this half smile, like she was testing if I'd bolt. We ordered food. The pub's fish and chips arrived in baskets lined with fake newsprint. Gareth asked if I minded if he ate too. Apparently the interview was hungry work. Between bites, he asked about boundary agreements with ex-tenants. River corrected him. Partners. Pets? None, I said. Potential for future cat? River's eyes lit up. I do want a cat named Crumbs. I could feel myself softening despite the absurdity. Part of me admired the audacity. I'm a researcher. I live for frameworks. And there was something oddly comforting about someone laying it all out, even if that someone was a middle-aged man with a clipboard. I asked if I could pose questions back. River brightened. Of course. So I took the clipboard and asked about her conflict style. How she apologizes. How she likes to be comforted. Gareth looked oddly proud, like we were his best tenants yet. When the plates were cleared, Gareth stood. Provisional approval, he said. 6-month trial. Break clause at 3 if either party fails to take out the bins. He left us with a carbon copy of the form. River exhaled. I know it's weird, she said. My last ex gaslit me so hard I now outsource my gut. Gareth's seen me at my worst. I told her it was the strangest thing I'd ever liked. She laughed, and for a moment, the table felt lighter. We dated for 5 months. Gareth never reappeared, except once when he came to fix a leaky tap and made me a cup of tea while he waited for the sealant to set. River and I fought about normal things, wet towels on the bed, her habit of triple booking weekends. The intimacy was good, though. She liked to curl against me in the mornings, tracing lazy shapes on my chest. She teased that Gareth would have approved of my maintenance skills. When we broke up, mutual bittersweet, we wrote a joint end-of-tenancy letter in Google Docs. We listed what we'd keep, my espresso machine, and what we'd return, each other's hoodies. Gareth emailed, deposit returned in full. It felt, bizarrely, like closure. He was beautiful in the way bad decisions are, all sharp edges and the faint hum of trouble. Name, Orion. We matched while I was halfway through rage baking a batch of blondies. His opening line, you look like trouble in the best way. I replied, you look like trouble in the worst way. He sent a winking emoji. I should have run. Instead, we set a date for Thursday night at a burger joint that brines its pickles like it's a religion. I got there first and grabbed a booth. It smelled like seared beef, fryer oil, and onion rings, the kind of scent that sticks to your hair and your soul. Orion strolled in 5 minutes later. In person, he was even more distracting, tall, lean, with that loose-hipped walk that says I don't hurry for anyone. His black t-shirt fit like it had been made for him, and his eyes did that thing where they scan you once, slow, before locking on your face. He slid into the booth across from me, grinning. Bia, he said like he was testing the weight of my name. We talked jobs. I'm a junior dentist. He does creative direction for a clothing brand. Favorite films, travel dreams. He was charming in that slightly performative way that makes you feel like you're in a scene. When the waiter came, I ordered my usual, double cheeseburger, extra pickles, fries. Orion waved the menu away. Not hungry, he said, leaning back like a billboard for mayhem. Food arrived, glorious and steaming. I picked up a fry and was halfway to my mouth when he said, "Can I have one?" "Take a few," I said, generous because flirtation makes me communal. He plucked one from the basket, ate it, then, without breaking eye contact, leaned forward and licked the ends of the rest. Slowly. I froze. He sat back, satisfied. "Claiming," he said. My brain was a fireworks factory at midnight. "Did you just? So no one else takes them," he added, casual as you please. "That's..." I searched for a word that wasn't gross. "Territorial." He smirked. "That too." The way he said it, low, almost teasing, made a part of my brain go, okay, so this is a kink thing. I put the fry in my hand down. "Orion, if you wanted to play that game, maybe you should have asked first." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't like being marked?" "That depends on the context," I said, matching his tone. "And the consent." He grinned. "Consider this a preview." I took a sip of my drink to keep from saying preview of what, exactly. We debated lightly but with real edges about consent, hygiene, kink versus basic manners. He admitted he liked bratty, possessive play. I said that's fine when everyone's agreed. He said, "I agree," as if that fixed it retroactively. I said, "Nope." He looked amused rather than chastened. "Can I at least lick the pickles?" I stared at him like I was on The Office. The waiter came by to ask if everything was okay. I smiled sweetly and said, "Could we get another order of fries, please?" When they arrived, I slid them to my side of the table and ate one slowly, making eye contact the whole time. Then I pushed the rest to the far edge. "You can have those. Lick them, marry them, start a preschool with them, your call." He chuckled, but there was a flicker of something. Embarrassment? Maybe. He picked up a fry, this time eating it like a normal human. "I misread you," he said. "I like big gestures." "Big gestures are fine," I said, "when they're for both people." We finished eating in a strange détente. Conversation drifted to music, travel, favorite terrible movies. He was easy to talk to when his tongue wasn't on my food. When the bill came, he insisted on paying. Outside, the night was warm, smelling faintly of grilled meat and city dust. He walked me to my car, hands in his pockets. "So second date?" I hesitated. "Let me think about it." He smiled like he already knew the answer he wanted. That night, he texted, "I'll keep my tongue to myself next time." I replied, appreciated. We didn't go out again. Back at the clinic the next day, I told my hygienist. She laughed so hard she fogged her face shield. "At least he's into flossing," she said. That night, I rage-baked blondies. I did not share. He messaged me the way a man might tap a glass aquarium. Softly, experimentally, like testing the boundary between worlds. His profile picture was him in a linen shirt, sitting cross-legged on a dock, gazing out at water the color of steel. His bio read, "Practicing presence. Trying silence for a month." I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to decide if it was pretentious or intriguing. I wrote back, "Most men I date are already trying silence, usually after I ask, 'So what are you looking for?'" He sent a smiling face, that bland emoji shrug of modern romance. And then, "Would you be open to a silent date?" I said yes because I am 28 and 2 online, because my therapist once told me, "Try discomfort in safe containers," and because part of me is a moth for the flames of weird experiments. A cafe at 6 p.m. counts as a container. We chose a place with mismatched chairs, low golden light, and the kind of hanging plants that made you feel like you're on a botanical honeymoon. He said he'd bring a journal, to make it intentional. In my head I pictured bullet journaling, washi tape, maybe a pen with a cartoon animal topper. What I didn't picture was a leather-bound tome thick as a family Bible, which is exactly what he set down on the table like an extra guest. He was handsome in the mild way that gets you better tables without anyone quite knowing why. Well-combed hair, jawline like a clean page, eyes soft but watchful. Linen shirt, buttoned just low enough that my gaze dipped there once, involuntarily. His mouth looked like it knew about herbal tea and slow mornings. He lifted one finger in greeting, the gesture so deliberate it almost felt like a blessing, then spread his hands, palms up, and nodded. The ceremony of it made me want to bow or giggle. I did neither. We ordered by pointing at the menu. I pointed to an oat latte, he to a black tea. The barista looked at us like she was wondering if she'd been drafted into a silent film. He opened the leather journal and wrote in looping script, then turned it to me. "Thank you for consenting to this experiment. How is your breath?" I laughed, a quick, startled burst, and he smiled but pressed a finger to his lips. My laugh folded into the steam of my cup. I reached for the pen to answer, but he slid it back toward himself with the gentleness you'd use to stop a toddler from touching a hot stove. He scribbled again. The world is too loud. Let's see what remains when we stop trying to fill it. I hated that it was kind of beautiful, and I hated that my chest tightened a little in recognition. We sat. We drank. Someone behind us coaxed milk through an espresso machine until it screamed like a gull fighting over chips. I tried to look graceful while sipping, aware of every muscle in my face. He looked at me the way you listen to rain, attention without urgency. 7 minutes in, I felt oddly tender. 10 minutes in, bored. 15 minutes in, panicked. My brain staged a mutiny. Should I smile? Too much smiling is creepy. Should I nod? Nodding feels like kindergarten teacher energy. Should I look away to be mysterious? That's what catfish do. What are my hands doing? Why are my shoulders in my ears? Oh God, does he think my blinking pattern is needy? He wrote again, turned the journal toward me. Can I observe you? He'd already ticked a small box next to the question, as if consent was assumed. Underneath, your left ear is higher than your right. Your right eye scans the room. Your left foot keeps time with the grinder. You carry your body like you owe it an apology. Every past version of me furrowed her brow at once. I wanted to argue, to say I carry my body like someone who keeps the lights on, like someone who does burpees at 7 a.m. to beat the cruel math of the day. But the rules were the rules, so I sipped my latte, tried absurdly to lower my left ear. He wrote more. You're funny when you're gagged by choice. He underlined funny. I like the way you place your cup down. You land it softly like it might startle. I wasn't sure if I felt seen or pinned. Maybe both. He reached for the sugar. With the solemnity of communion, he stirred his tea exactly 7 times. I counted. He set the spoon on the saucer, parallel, like aligning a compass to true north. He folded a napkin into a perfect rectangle and slipped it beneath the cup to save the wood from a ring. It wasn't smug, just the behavior of someone with time to spare. Do you want to walk? He wrote. We walked. The city evening was damp and humming. A bus sighed. A dog trotted past in a raincoat like a tiny municipal worker. We were a peculiar parade, him, his leather journal, and me, narrating everything in my head. He stopped at a mural, women with bright oranges for heads, eyes replaced by spirals of rind. He wrote, what would you call this? He handed me the pen this time like a relay baton. Citrus witnesses, I wrote. His smile spread until his mouth looked like a sail catching wind. Yes, he wrote. We moved again, exchanging questions and answers in the journal. I learned he worked in UX design and believed door handles should teach you how to open them by shape alone. I learned he used to talk too much when anxious, until he tried a week of vows and felt his tongue reset. I learned he could laugh without sound, shoulders shaking, eyes alight. At the riverside, he wrote, what are you proud of that you rarely say out loud? My hands buzzed as I wrote. I paid my mum's debt last year. Quietly. He read it, nodded, eyes soft. Wrote, thank you for saying that somewhere, even if it's here. Something warm bloomed low in my stomach, not sexual exactly, but close to it, the tiny ache of being understood. But somewhere between that and the train station I noticed something. His writing pace had shifted. The tilt of his pen was sharper, faster. His mouth twitched once, twice. And when he angled the journal away from me, I caught a glimpse, not of looping poetic lines, but of short, jagged sentences. We stopped at a crossing. He was scribbling again, the page shielded with his hand. My curiosity, already pacing like a caged animal, shoved my patience out of the way. Let me see, I said. My voice startled both of us, the first words I'd spoken in over an hour. He shook his head, smiling faintly, like I was a child asking for candy before dinner. I reached out before I could talk myself down. My fingers closed on the journal, his grip tightened, but I yanked. The leather cover was warm from his hands. The paper smelled faintly of tea and ink. And there it was, row after row of observations, but not the gentle, monkish ones from before. She blinks too much. Probably nervous or lying. Laugh is too loud for her face. Posture like a question mark. Maybe insecure. Neck blotches when she's trying too hard. I bet she's bad in bed, too self-conscious. Pretty, but in a way that will age badly. It went on, and on. I felt heat flood my cheeks, my chest, my scalp. Not lust this time. Anger so sharp it was almost clean. I looked up at him. He was watching me, unreadable. Is this what the experiment was about? My voice shook. He didn't answer. Maybe he thought silence would save him now too. I shoved the journal back into his chest, hard enough that he stumbled a half step. "You could have just unmatched me," I said. I turned and walked fast, the city swallowing me in its noise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look. My ex and I broke up around 4 months ago, after dating for a little over a year. She was the one who broke up with me, but at the time I agreed that it was for the best, so we ended things on good terms. We're pretty chill now, and we have mutual friends, so we often all hang out together. So things between us are chill and friendly. I work at a research lab at my university, and I just recently landed the position after a pretty damn long and competitive application/interviewing process. I met my boss, who's a grad student, and we became buddies pretty fast. He's a really nice and funny dude that knows what he's doing. I see him every day since me and 2 other undergrads work under him and help with his research while he helps use with our own. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and I see on my ex's Snapchat story a fucking picture of my boss with a heart emoji. I'm shocked as fuck, so I reply to her story asking her who her new boy is, and sure enough, she tells me she's dating my boss. I feign happiness for her, and I don't tell her that he's my boss or that I know him in any way. But damn, I felt like someone just stabbed me in the heart. Although I didn't have feelings for after our breakup, but after seeing her story, I was just hit with a pang of jealousy. Maybe it's because he's a major step up from me. I'm a poor, disorganized undergrad, and then he's a successful, young talent who has his shit together. The next day at work, I'm basically on edge the whole day. I would look at my boss, remember that he's dating my ex, and just feel so uncomfortable. The rest of the week was like that too. I stopped joking around with him, and kind of just stopped talking in general to him. Now I dread seeing him every day because the fact that he's my boss, so he orders me around, just makes me feel shittier and more below him. He's got the girl and I've got no one. I still love my job though, and I worked so hard to get it, so I'm not planning on leaving. I also feel like a shitty person since my boss has been nothing less of nice and is honestly a great guy. Now I just feel like I should have tried harder in our relationship because damn, she was pretty perfect in every way, and I just let it all slip through. The other day, she came over to have lunch with him during his lunch break, and I saw them laughing together, and yeah, another wave of sadness and jealousy. What do I even do now? How do I stop feeling like this? How should I normalize the situation at work? I've been trying to focus on myself and my work and not care about my ex and my boss who's dating her. It worked pretty well. I started a painting, and I'm pretty close to finishing it, and I impressed my boss, the professor who owns the lab, not the one dating my ex, by staying late for 2 days in a row to finish a really difficult experiment. During our lab meeting, my boss shouted me out in front of the entire lab and said he was really impressed by my hard work and dedication. That felt good. As for the situation with my boss and my ex, he found out. Like I mentioned in my previous post, when my ex told me who her new boyfriend was, I didn't mention that he was my boss, so neither of them knew. 2 days ago, my boss and us, 2 other undergrads, were in a conference room discussing a paper when my ex came in. She came to drop off my boss's wallet that I think he forgot or something. Anyway, she saw me, did a double take and went, "Jayaki?" She was definitely super surprised and caught off guard, and her boss was already like, "WTF?" So I was just like, Sarah." She shot me another shocked, wide-eyed look and left. Suffice to say, the rest of the meeting was pretty awkward. The next day, it was obvious that my boss now knew our history. Things just turned so awkward. Like he didn't know how to act around me anymore, and what to say. Now we're both awkward around each other. He's still nice and all, but things are just uncomfortable between us two now. It's not his fault though. I think that things will get better between the two of us, but as of right now, I actually feel kind of relieved that he now knows. Something about how both of us now don't know how to act and what to do kind of makes me feel reassured. Sarah also called me the night that she found out I worked there, but I missed her call and forgot to call back. It's good though. I've been trying to think of her less and distance myself a bit. But if things continue to remain really awkward to the point where both of our work is affected, I'll consider talking to my boss about switching me to work under another grad student instead. But yeah, that's about all. Again, thanks for the help, guys. I met Danielle on a dating app, and we immediately hit it off. Conversation was super easy for us, so we swapped numbers and spent the next 2 weeks texting and talking on the phone. I explained early on that I want to take my time, because not only am I looking for something serious, but also have work commitments the next few months. I work in tech product sales, which can be very busy, and also involve me leaving the city for a few days at a time. She said she understood and was also looking for something long-term. Great. We met the weekend before Valentine's and had a nice restaurant date following by dessert and coffee. We finished with a kiss, and I walked her back to her car. It was definitely the best date I've been on since my last relationship. The next day I called her to say I was looking forward to seeing her again and would plan something when I get back. I live in a major North American city, and from the 15th to 17th I was booked 3 hours away for on-site client meetings. I told her about this and let her know we'd keep in touch. On the Friday I'm due to get back, I get a message from a close female friend asking who I pissed off. I have no clue what she's talking about. She sends me a screenshot of my photo on what looks like a FB page and tells me it's a private group where women call out men for cheating. It's called Are We Dating the Same Guy? And this particular group is just for people from my city. In the screenshot, multiple people are posting under my picture with mostly harmless comments like, "Oh, I went on a date with him years ago, he was okay." But there were others like "PM me for the tea," and one woman said, "He's an angry asshole, stay away for your safety." Because it's FB, I instantly recognized her name as someone I went on a date with last summer, who I had to block after she repeatedly tried to sell me her cat. Absolute lunatic. A few things about me. I am single. I have never been married, and my last relationship was over a year ago. I am very selective, and Danielle was the first date I'd been on since the end of summer. I am also a very private person. I don't use social media, and I don't kiss and tell. The fact that my photo is on this site is mortifying. What makes matters worse is when I got home I started getting texts from a bunch of other people I know either laughing at me or calling me a womanizer. As of now I'm aware that several female friends have seen it. One coworker, my sister, and a woman I know who lives in the same building as me that excitedly grabbed me when I was leaving this morning to tell me, "I saw you on that Facebook group." Apparently it's a lot more popular than I realized. There's only one person who would have the motivation to do this, so I called Danielle on the weekend and asked her. Initially she denied it, but after some prodding that flipped to apparently her friend posting it. Why? Because a few of them had gotten tipsy together on Valentine's, as they're all single. My name came up after her friends asked why she wasn't with me that night after the great date she'd told them about. Apparently me not being around as I was leaving early the next morning for work was suspicious, as was the fact we'd been talking for multiple weeks, but she'd never seen my place. She gave them a pic I used on the dating app, and one of them posted it. She told me she was sorry, but that I seemed too good to be true. Her last relationship ended due to cheating, and she wanted to make sure I wasn't married or in a relationship. I told her I needed some time to think and would be in touch. That was Saturday. We've been silent until today, where I woke up to dozens of MSGs from her saying things along the lines of, "I'm so sorry / I'm so angry with myself for this," and then the real truth. It was her that posted it. She wanted to come completely clean and apologized for lying, telling me she panicked when I confronted her, but she wants it all out now. She sent me screenshots, unprovoked, of the PM conversations she was having with women in the group about me. Aside from the one head case I mentioned earlier, there was nothing accusatory, but what I couldn't get over was how they were discussing me in such an open manner. It had nothing to do with whether I was single or cheating. It was stuff like, "He took me to this restaurant, he drives this kind of car, this is what he's like in bed, this is what his place is like, this is how much money I think he makes." I would never talk about exes or people I've dated like that. And if a guy tried to talk to me about Danielle like that, I'd think he was a fucking weirdo and tell him to stop. My two closest female friends are divided on this, so I'm here for advice. One thinks that women need to protect themselves against predators and violence, and groups like this are necessary. The other is angry on my behalf because the presumption of men being posted to that group are that they're cheaters or sketchy. Otherwise, why would anyone even post them there? I really don't know what to do next. I've never had to deal with anything remotely like this before. I liked Danielle, but it was one date. She also lied to me about it at first. This seems like a headache, and we've never even had sex yet. Is she going to get even more paranoid after that? It doesn't feel like we're compatible. This feels like the past 3 weeks of us talking have been one massive waste, and that actually stings because she's the first person I've really liked since my ex. Went out with a few friends to grab some wings and beer after a long week of work. One of my buddies' GFs who I've known for years shows up with a few friends, mostly people I've met before, but one chick I haven't met, extremely good looking, 5'9" blonde. Honestly, thought she would probably be a ditz by looking at her, but she wasn't at all. We instantly hit it off, and she starts talking about some sitcoms I've been obsessed with lately that aren't too popular among my group of friends, Larry Sanders and News Radio. Takes one sniff of my scotch and tells me what it is cracking these big jokes and making everyone we were with piss their pants. Honestly, chick was awesome. Next thing I know, we're headed back to my place both extremely drunk. So I have no clue what's happening at all. We finally get to my apartment. She dashes for my kitchen, and next thing I know she's cranking out omelets. Then all of a sudden, she sees my comp and throws on some stand-up, which was beyond hysterical. So I'm just thinking holy ____ this chick is amazing. After that we watched stand-up for about an hour and ate this breakfast she cooked at 3 a.m. and then she leaves with just a big hug. Next day, I wake up with the hangover from hell. The type of hangover that as soon as you open your eyes you know you're screwed. Stumble into my shower, and in the haze of the water over my head I keep hearing my phone go off. Don't think anything of it. Next thing I know my apartment buzzer goes off. Still don't think anything of it. Then both keep going off. I decide to check my apartment buzzer first. I hear a female voice. Why aren't you picking up my calls? I ask who is it? It's the chick from last night. I then look at my phone and see 17 missed calls from a number I don't know. I call it back, it's her. I buzz her in and she comes upstairs and I'm assuming she just left something here. But she said, "You said you were free today, thought we could hang out." I'm thinking to myself, did I? So I just go along with it. We talk for a while about a bunch of random stuff, then watch some TV. I then tell her I have a bunch of errands to do, and I think I want to take a nap, assuming she'd leave. She said, "Oh cool, I'll come with you," so literally came with me to get a haircut, pick up my dry cleaning, go food shopping. And throughout all of this she's borderline silent, completely different than the night before. We then finally get back to my place, and then she says she's tired and going to take a nap. I'm assuming she'd leave, but nope, she crashes on my couch. I then decide to take a nap and try and process all of this. I wake up and she's staring at me. I realize it's been almost a 3-hour nap. She says to me, "You're beautiful when you sleep." I start nervously laughing, and then get up and head to my bathroom to throw some water on my face. I go back to my living room and she's made mac and cheese with cold cuts in it. Literally my favorite meal. I didn't remember telling her this, and I asked her how she knew. She called my best friend, who she knows, and asked. I'm thinking, okay, this is creepy, but kinda awesome. She finally leaves after another movie, with just a peck on the cheek. Next AM, I hear my door open. I immediately think it's a break and enter as the only people who have my keys are my parents, and I grab my lacrosse stick under my bed and wait in my bedroom. I peek out from a crack in my door to look. It's her. I walk out and ask her how she got in. She explained to me she grabbed my keys and had a copy made down the block when I was napping yesterday. So I didn't have to do it for her. I then see she has a huge suitcase next to her, and she unzips and starts unpacking. Well, if we're going out, I'm leaving some stuff here. I say, "Whoa, I think we're taking this a little too quick." She immediately bursts into tears and starts screaming at me, "I am perfect for you," over and over again, packs up, and then runs out of my apartment slamming doors. I have no clue what's going on or where my keys are. I try to block the whole weekend out of my head, and then the next day I wake up to go to work. She's outside of my apartment at 6:30 a.m. waiting for me. I'm freaked out and try and talk to her. She barely says a word besides, "I'm sorry." We walk to the end of my block, and then she jumps in a cab without a word. Didn't hear from her at all Monday. I give a mutual friend a call and tell her what happened over the weekend, and she was shocked and said this chick isn't like this at all. Tuesday rolls around. I have 5 missed calls at work from a number I didn't know. It's her calling from her work line. Kept leaving messages to call her back. Finally call her back, and she's just breathing on the other line. Really freaked out by this and say, maybe it's best we don't talk to each other anymore. I then hear her cry and she hangs up. I'm thinking, okay, this is finally done with. I go to a friend's birthday that Friday. She's there. My best friend comes up to me and said, "Hey, I didn't know you were going out with _______." Well, that was news to me. I had no idea either. Asked him why did he hear this. Pointed right at the chick, and she was there and she waved at me and winked. He said she was telling everyone that night she thinks, "You're gonna get married to each other." I'm beyond freaked out. I tell my buddy everything that happened, and we both decided to leave and told my friend whose birthday it was we'll take him out for drinks another day. I go home that night. She's sitting on my couch. She immediately yells at me, "Why did you tell people we weren't going out?" I ask her to leave and pull out my phone and told her I was going to text the cops. She cries and then leaves without saying a word. Immediately called our mutual friend and told her what happened, and she's freaked out for me. She calls the insane chick's parents. Finds out this happened one other time in college. She had a stalking problem with a guy. Said her parents know she still calls him from time to time. Next day I changed my locks. Haven't heard from her in about 2 weeks now. Scared she'll pop up out of nowhere again.